All right, welcome back to United in the States. Brand new show. Basically, going to do a new show. Going to talk about a couple different topics. The transfer window, which starts, for sure or officially on June 15th in the Premier League. Sometimes they start at different times for different leagues, but for United in the Premier League, it officially opens in 5 days. Um, but basically wanted to do something a little bit different to the match reactions, just because the summer transfer season is completely wild. It's like NBA free agency times 10. The major difference is the media are in on the shenanigans, so are the agents and the clubs as well. And what I mean by that is, the media is completely just driving clicks and views. They're not necessarily looking for the most accurate information. They're just looking for what gets the most eyeballs. So basically, you're going to see a few different things. You'll see with Manchester United specifically, something like 400 or 500 players literally being linked to the club. Everyone who is looking to get some buzz or attention to their article, they'll be doing things like, to use a bad example, this player is being recruited by Harvard, Cornell, and the Miami Dolphins, and Manchester United and Miami Dolphins in this situation. There's no connection between those clubs or the level the player is playing at, but they still will mention them. Or it'll be something like the player and the agent are looking to get a move, so they'll mention Manchester United, or they're looking to get a better deal, from their club to get a better salary, better terms, whatever. So they'll mention that they're speaking to other clubs, and Manchester United are naturally the club that they want to talk about because, they know we've paid silly salaries for a while. Another reason this is an important summer, though, is because of the context of the club. The club was put up for sale something like 18 months ago, and they said there was a lot of stuff on the table. It wasn't just full sale; it was also, investment. So they looked into selling the club to a few different parties. Jim Ratcliffe stepped forward. Sheikh Jassim from Qatar, or Qatar. Sorry, I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. He stepped forward as well, and that group. And those were the two most serious contenders for a full sale. And then there was also some contenders for a partial sale or, a substantial investment. I think the Elliott Group was mentioned, and a few other sort of investment buyer or, investment banks, VC funds, that kind of thing. And, everyone was pushing for a full sale, or all the real United fans were pushing for a full sale because, of course, you want the Glazers gone. They've been at the club for almost 20 years now, and they took, what it was essentially a club that had a, 6-length lead and turned it into a middle of the pack club, basically. So everyone was happy to see the backs of them. And then it turns out, come November, it's announced a sale to Ineos and Jim Ratcliffe. And it wasn't a full sale, it was a partial sale. Jim Ratcliffe becomes the largest single investor in the club, but he still only owns 26 or 27%, something along those lines. The Glazers still combine, the Glazer siblings, the children of Malcolm Glazer, who was the original investor, they still own combined around 50% of the club. But they're not necessarily, a unified front, from what I understand, on all issues. Some of them wanted to sell, some of them wanted to continue. So we'll see what, that percentage really is for Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos when there is their first sort of, argument between him and the Glazers on the direction of the club. We'll see how much power he actually yields. But besides just the first transfer window since there was a sale of the club, it's also the first real sort of changing of the guard in about 10 years. So when Sir Alex Ferguson, the famed Man United coach or manager, resigned and retired back in 2013, 2012, 2013, he took David Gill with him, who was the chief executive at the time on the football side. and a brand new sort of vision, transfer structure, organization was going to come forward the next year, and it involved David Moyes coming in as manager, and that really didn't turn out well. And Ed Woodward being moving from just being the CEO of the business side to the CEO of the sporting side as well. That was really unsuccessful, just because there was no sort of coherent vision or strategy. There was no idea of what they were going to do. That first window was chaotic. There was ideas of all these different players they thought they were going to sign. There was a rumor of a meeting with fake agents. They thought they were going to meet the representatives of a specific player, and it turned out to be just people who were unaffiliated with this player. It was just a grand waste of time, and it showed sort of the inexperience of the market, of Manchester United in the market. Now, with Ineos coming in, they have a sporting division. They have a cycling division, which is run by Sir Dave Brailsford, who helped restore England cycling and turn them into a powerhouse. They went from not winning for 60, 70 years or whatever it was to winning year after year. And he was part of the team, or he was the head of the team that brought them there. And his whole thing was marginal gains. Instead of trying to make huge adjustments, you make small adjustments each day, and those adjustments, they stack and snowball into huge gains. So that's who this guy is. And Ineos has a sporting team of Dale Brailsford, Jim Ratcliffe, of course, Jean-Claude Blanc, who is CEO at Juventus, and then PSG, well renowned for his marketing nous and his ability to create profitable structures at big clubs. And they, in the past, they purchased a Swiss club, and then more recently, maybe 6 years ago, they purchased Nice in Ligue 1, the French league, and those have been sort of their training grounds. They're sort of testing, where they tried all of their theories and built up to this moment where they could buy a Premier League club. And when they bought the Manchester United, or the portion of Manchester United, Nice were actually in first place in Ligue 1. So it looked like they had finally sort of figured it out, or they'd gotten close to figuring it out, and it looked like a really good decision. So not only are we bringing in a brand new ownership group, where that first window with Ed Woodward in place and the new regime, it was very chaotic, and there was only one signing at the end of the window, where United could have signed two players. I think it was either Baines, I can't remember, it was Baines and Fellaini. They could have signed both players for around the same fee that they ended up signing just Fellaini for on the deadline day window. And he was the single transfer that they brought in to a team that had won the league the previous year. And that year ended very poorly. They finished in 7th place. The manager was fired with about 6 games to go. And it was not a very good title defense. And a lot of it was, done or attributed to the bad transition from the old regime to the new regime. So the team was sold, or the portion was sold to Ineos in November. They immediately started making changes. They were given a mandate to take over the football side of the club. And they started putting their players in, or their not players, but their personnel in immediately. A Man City rising star was named as the new CEO, and Omar Barada, a guy who came up through Barcelona and then moved to City with their director of football and a lot of their team, and was seen as someone who was potential to take over from Tiki Bergistan, who is the director of football for Manchester City. Obviously, probably the most successful team in England in the last 7 years. Not probably, but definitely. So that was a nice coup. They signed him. They had earmarked Dan Ashworth from Newcastle, who had also, been at Brighton before, as the director of football. And it looked like they started to make changes immediately. Richard Arnold left. John Murtaugh was someone who was rumored to leave. He stayed through most of the season, but he ended up leaving, a few weeks earlier. And then Patrick Stewart, who, not the, Star Trek Patrick Stewart, but the guy who was the general counsel and interim CEO after Richard Arnold had stepped down. He ended up leaving as well. And Jean-Claude Blanc, I think, was named as the interim CEO until Omar Barada can start, after his, gardening leave or layover period between jobs. I think he starts on July 15th. So, there is a huge amount of turnover. Ineos look like they have experience running sport on multiple levels. They brought in Jason Wilcox to be the technical director. He was at Man City. I think he was head of the youth academy for a while. And then he just moved to Southampton a year ago in the championship to be their director of football. He came in to take the technical director job. So the mantra from Ineos has been, best in class. So they've been trying to assemble the super team to make decisions. But you know what they say about best laid plans. These are all things that sounded good in theory, but haven't necessarily worked out in practice so far. Fast forward 7 months, and we're in the middle of June, and a little issue happened. So a lot of people speculated this right away. It didn't sound that way from what Ineos were saying. But the manager was always, I think, going to be a little bit of an issue there. A lot of people speculated Ineos would want their own manager in place just because they start a new regime and they want, to bring their guy in to do what they want. The rumor has been that Ineos want someone who takes a little bit of the power away and gives it back to the structure of the organization and focus just mostly on being a coach and not as much on running the team and setting strategy. Like Ineos wants to determine the style of play. They want to determine who all the transfers in, and the manager just basically coaches the players that they give to them. I know this may sound, very normal for American sports fans, just because that's what happens. You have a GM, the GM brings players in, and the head coach plays them. If you have a powerful head coach, there's probably more give and take or more collaboration there. But European sports don't necessarily operate this way. Some of them do. Some of the organizations do this, and maybe this is what they're trying to move towards. But European clubs, they operate a little bit more in sort of the college model, where you have, the head coach is almost more similar to the manager, where the head coach is the one who sets the strategy for the whole club. They're the one who does all the recruiting, the player recruitment, the player acquisition, and they kind of see everything. They're in charge of everything from top to bottom. Now, I'm not saying they're the exact same way in Europe. They still have directors of football and scouting organizations and these acquisition teams who do a lot of the heavy lifting and the legwork. And then the manager kind of steps in where he's like, okay, this is the player type that I'm looking for. Maybe they'll mention like what the player position is and the type of player they're looking for. Maybe they'll compare it to a specific player who's out there, for lack of a better comparison. They're like, oh, I want a Messi type on the right wing. I want a guy well, that's a bad example because, that's a one-of-one. But you understand what I'm saying. They're saying I want a, like if you're college coach and you run a specific system, I would like a quarterback who I think will be good in the spread option. He can run very fast. He's athletic. He's mobile, but he also is good at short passes because we do a lot of play action, quick slants, to our receivers. We're not going down the field a lot. Well, another manager or coach will say, yeah, I want a quarterback. He doesn't need to be super athletic, maybe move around in the pocket a little bit, but I want a strong arm guy because we're going to do a lot of downfield passing. That's how it works in Europe a little bit more. And, they're even going out and pointing to specific players, and the teams will say, okay, we can't get this guy, but here are 3 alternatives that we think will, fit the bill and help you guys out there. So that's how it operates there. And it looks like Ineos were trying to move a little bit more towards the American model, where they just acquire the players themselves and give them to the coach. So Ten Hag has had a very tough season this season, and acquisition hasn't looked great, but I think he's had a lot to do a lot more himself as opposed to other managers. And things were going poorly. Ineos was not really backing him, but they were speaking in ways where, they were sympathetic to the issues that we had at United this year. There was a lot of injury issues and, a lot of things that, it's understandable if a manager struggles in those situations, just because, if you have 45, different injuries, 67, separate occurrences of injuries for the team. You're not playing your starting back line almost the entire season. You go 3 months without your starting defensive midfielder, 3 months with only one fit left back, something like 12 games with your starting center backs playing, even less with your starting left back. Those are things that anyone's going to struggle to succeed under those conditions. What happened with United this year is that they didn't necessarily back him, but they were speaking like they were sympathetic, but at the same time, they didn't give him any help either. They didn't step into press conferences to give him a vote of confidence. They didn't, free any funds to be sent in the winter transfer window. And as we got close to the end of the year, it seemed a lot more like their intention was to sack him all along. Yeah, they gave him a chance to turn things around. If he had, finished probably, top 3, top 4 with, cup win, then maybe they would have to give him another chance. But at the same time, people were saying things about, like Louis van Gaal, he won the FA Cup. He was still sacked. United brought in Jose Mourinho, I don't know, a few hours after he won the FA Cup. And they were speaking like Ten Hag wasn't their guy, and they were looking to bring somebody else in. And we made it to the FA Cup final after, a few exciting and a few heart in your throat games. Like we beat Liverpool, which is an amazing win. And then we almost lost to Coventry in the semifinals, which was a tough act to swallow. Basically, it seemed like the writing was on the wall and he wasn't the guy for them. Plus, United were playing Manchester City in the final, and Manchester City was considered the best team in Europe, even though they lost to Real Madrid in the Champions League. Most people consider Manchester City, treble winners from the year before, to be the best team in Europe currently. United went into that match as heavy underdogs. The news leaked before the match that United's manager was going to get fired. Ten Hag was going to get fired regardless of the result. Most people felt like the FA Cup result should not affect the outcome of the manager, how they felt about the manager, because Ineos had been conducting a review since they took over. And one match, whether it's a win or a loss, should not really affect, what people think and how they feel about this manager. But at the same time, United went out and they beat City, and they beat them deservedly. In the first half, United put the ball in the back of the net 3 times. They were up 2-0, and City had one shot on goal, or one shot on target. And in the second half, they brought on Doku. They changed a few things. Yeah, the game got a little bit more open, and City was a little bit more into it. But Wan-Bissaka largely swallowed up Doku. And if it wasn't for a Nana mistake on top of a very good performance, then United probably would have kept the clean sheet and beaten what everyone thought was the best team in the world 2-0 in the FA Cup. And that was Ten Hag's second cup in 2 seasons. So he won silverware back-to-back seasons. The first time that's been done since Alex Ferguson left. The first manager to win, the fourth manager to win silverware in back-to-back seasons. The others being Alex Ferguson, Sir Matt Busby, who was the manager in the 50s and 60s, and another guy whose name I don't know, sorry, but he was coach in like the 1910s, I want to say. Ten Hag had a lot of great stats. He had a very good first season. So, you combine all those stats now with this fresh win against City and the resume he's put together and the trophies he's won, the youth players he's brought through, Garnacho and Mainu, 2 youth players who he's featured heavily and trusted this year. both of them being the scorers. Mainu, the 19-year-old, scoring the winning goal in the FA Cup final, being named FA Cup player of the tournament. You know, playing youth players is really part of United's ethos and their history. So the public perception of Ten Hag shifted slightly. Even before that match, you could say 60-70% of the fans thought Ten Hag deserved the third season or an additional season after the first two. And after this, it went up to basically 90%. You know, and Arsenal, a team who the last 2 years has finished second, they've played good football, they've been decent. They were in first place for large portions of both seasons. They finished with no silverware in the last 2 years, but United have finished with silverware in the past 2 seasons. And even though they finished 8th, which is the worst Premier League place, it's not the worst points total. They got to 60 points, but their 8th place is the worst finish since, ironically, Alex Ferguson finished 13th in 89. But still, the 8th place is not acceptable. But at the same time, they were out of Europe. Winning the FA Cup means they get into the Europa League. They bumped Chelsea out of the Europa League, a direct rival, which affects Chelsea's ability to spend in the summer because of financial fair play. They bumped Newcastle, who consider United a rival, but United doesn't really care about Newcastle. They bumped them out of Europe entirely. And Chelsea was into the Europa Conference League, which is kind of the bootleg European competition. So this season looked a lot better. They had a better season than Newcastle because of this, better season than Chelsea because of this. Arsenal didn't have a trophy. Villa didn't have a trophy. Great season for Villa. They got into the Champions League, but they didn't win anything. And then Liverpool, in Klopp's final season, Ten Hag and, United, they ruined Liverpool's season. They went to Anfield in November, December. They got a 0-0 draw. It was the first non-win, I believe, at home for Liverpool this season. And then when Liverpool was first in the league, United beat them in the FA Cup quarterfinals in extra time 4-3, a deserved victory. I don't care what anybody says. And that basically derailed Liverpool's season. And they did win a trophy. They won the Carabao Cup. But in Klopp's final season, when they were talking about winning the quadruple, that was the nail in the coffin for them. So, United, Ten Hag's achievements, they stacked up in a way where people could look at them positively and in a positive light. And it went from him being, fired tomorrow to, 80-90% of the fans saying, give this guy a chance, give this guy a new contract. But, Ineos said they were going to perform their review. They weren't going to make any quick changes, based on emotion, which I think is the right decision. But, that's dragged on too long. And we're coming up on 3 weeks now, and United still don't know who their manager is. And, yesterday, it's been quiet from the established journalists. But, even just yesterday, there was news of, Thomas Tuchel meeting with Sir Jim in Monaco. And then there was news of Tuchel not taking the job, wanting a break from coaching. And, there's sort of that like back and forth there. Is it something that United didn't want Tuchel and they turned him down? Or is it something that Tuchel didn't want United and he turned the job down? I think, you hear those two reports, and I think you get the club side from one and Tuchel's side from the other. And that's why you have conflicting reports there. And then, Ineos had Tuchel, McKenna, Pochettino, and Thomas Frank were on a short list a few weeks ago. De Zerbi's also been mentioned. Gareth Southgate, the England manager, has been mentioned. It's kind of bedlam at this point where we're talking about all these managers, and Ineos is obviously talking to managers. McKenna went back to Ipswich, who he got promoted twice in a row, and he got a big contract from them. But it was news that he was United's first choice. Didn't work out. Don't think he was ready for the job, but maybe he didn't either. And then it turned to, Tuchel being, I think, the second choice. But he met with Sir Jim in Monaco, like I mentioned. And for whatever reason, he's not getting the job. And then after that, it's Pochettino. News came out yesterday that Pochettino's now unlikely. He was just fired by Chelsea. But he's a manager who was appreciated on a short list and now he's kind of out of the running, but nobody really knows if that's true or not. There's also been news that United haven't even spoken to Pochettino, and they haven't spoken to De Zerbi or Southgate, which kind of leaves Thomas Frank. And Thomas Frank got Brentford promoted a couple times. He's got, Brentford to stay in the Premier League, but that's different gravy to Manchester United. It's not the same, managing United versus, managing Brentford. I don't think he's ready. I'm not, super impressed with his style of play. So, I don't think that's the guy that we want. But, based on all the evidence, Erik ten Hag definitely looks like the best man for the job currently. And it's just a question of whether or not he's going to be able to stay in that position and he's going to be able to stay in that job. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But at this point, he's kind of twisting in the wind. He went on vacation for a while. He's back from vacation now. Apparently, he's back in Carrington. And, while he's supposedly working on transfers, Ineos are out there looking for his replacement, which is pretty nuts and not the most stable way to do things. So that was Manchester United manager news this week. As far as transfer news, just giving you a little bit of a rundown. It's been mostly quiet, the same way the manager front has been from the top journalists. We know what the priorities are for United. They want a center back. They want a right winger. They want a backup striker, defensive midfielder, and a left back. I would say of those positions, center back is probably the priority. And then, the others, because Varane left, and then the others, there's striker is probably a priority as well because they just don't have a backup striker. And then the others are, right wing, they want someone. Midfielder, they definitely want someone because they believe Casemiro's leaving. And then left back, they want someone just because they don't think Luke Shaw and Malacia are going to be reliable next year, which I agree with. Looking at the center backs, there's 3 names that have been mentioned the most. And the names are Brantwaite from Everton, Todibo from Nice, and Lenny Yoro from Lille. All great options. Brantwaite, he's rumored to be something like £70 million. If he's that much, that's crazy. But it sounds like Ineos don't want to go more than 55 million or 50 million for him. I think he's a decent player. He's young. He's like 19, very tall, 6'5", decent on the ball. Played at Feyenoord, I want to say, last year in the Dutch league, a team that, kept the ball and played a passing style. But at Everton, he played for Sean Dyche. They're very defensive. He's a decent signing. He's 2-footed, even though he's a lefty, but he can play both center halves. He's okay. I wouldn't be mad if we signed him, but I think we need someone to step in and play right center back and start and play next to Lisandro Martinez. Todibo, I think he's a great option. He's a Nice player, so Ineos know him very well. Ineos still own Nice, even though they're rumored to be selling him. He's a good player as well. I think he's a big guy. He's physical. He's very good on the ball. He's not great in the air. Like, he's not a bad header of the ball, but he doesn't win a ton of aerial duels, which is weird for a guy of his size. But he seems like much more of a ground athlete, if that makes sense. He's very quick. He's very good in the channels. He can defend one-on-one. And he's also very good at playing out from the back. I think he's a great fit for Ten Hag if Ten Hag is staying. And this is someone that Ten Hag wanted to sign last summer if he could have gotten rid of Harry Maguire. The last one of the top 3 targets is Lenny Yoro. This guy, he's 18, maybe 19 now. He played basically all season for Lille, who are in the Champions League. Center backs are tough. They're kind of like, you can play a young 18-year-old forward or even a midfielder, just because if those guys make mistakes, it's up the field. Other people can cover for them. If a young defender or a young goalie makes a mistake, a young keeper, then that's a huge mistake that leads to a goal that is somebody getting yanked out of the team. So an 18-year-old like Lenny Yoro playing, it shows kind of how mature he is, not just his physical abilities, but his mental as well. Apparently the sky's the limit for this kid, and he could be a Varane regen, but who's better on the ball. Rumor is Real Madrid are in for him. I think there's some issues with the transfer fee. United's being mentioned, but it could just be to kind of get Real Madrid to, get off their butts and get moving and get the deal done. As far as right wing targets, The three right wing targets are Olise, and Olise from Crystal Palace. There's some other people that have been mentioned, but Olise is the dream signing. He's got a £60 million release clause. He's 6 foot, good athlete, very good on the ball, a little bit left foot heavy, but he has a right foot. It's not like terrible. He's different to the other wingers, bar Sancho, where he's someone who's looking to pass and create for others first before creating for himself. And he's great for a team that's going to try to play balls into the striker or into other players. If you look at our forwards, they've all been very guilty of being selfish and trying to get theirs. We need a guy who's willing to make plays for other players, and then hopefully that can help spread the love for everyone else. The one issue I would have with Olise is that he has been injury prone this year. He has had hamstring injuries, and with how terrible United's medical staff has been in our injury record, not just this year, but the last several years, I'm worried about signing a guy like this. Unlike, Branthwaite and Todibo, but like Lenny Euro, other clubs are in, or Chelsea is in for Olise, and Chelsea seems motivated to get a deal done. So, United really want Olise. They really appreciate him. There might have to be some sales first, but he's a United fan. He grew up a United fan, and I think they're hoping he will wait for them when they're ready to come for him. As far as striker, this one is not as clear cut. The top three linked targets, I think, have been Benjamin Sesko from RB Leipzig, Matthias Cunha for Wolverhampton Wolves, and Joshua Zirkzee from Bologna. A few different types of profiles. Sesko and Zirkzee are both young strikers. They're both 21, 22, 23, that range. Cunha is a little older. I think he's 25, 26. Zirkzee and Cunha are more, like you call more false nine type striker, comfortable dropping deep, linking up play, playing the wingers in behind. Similar to that kind of Anthony Martial mold. And they're different players. Cunha is not small, but he's kind of more mobile, quick, athletic. Zirkzee is very mobile. He's very quick, but he's a really big guy. He's like 6'4", 185 pounds. Looks like Memphis, but if Memphis was like a foot taller. You guys remember Memphis Depay from like 10 years ago on United. Both are very good, technically on the ball, and can be guys who play in tight spaces and can play forwards in. Sesko is a little bit more of a target man. He's very big also. He's like 6'5". I remember in preseason, not this past year. This past summer, he was on RB, not Leipzig, he was on Salzburg, and they played Liverpool in the preseason, and I watched him bully Van Dijk and Konate, who are both big, extremely physical Premier League strikers, and they could not handle this guy's physicality. He's a good player. He's got a £60 million release clause. I think Zirkzee has like a £35 million release clause, but Sesko is more of a get in behind, get on the end of things. He's also skilled player, but he's a little bit different to Zirkzee and Cunha. I think Cunha would probably be in the £60 million range, maybe a little bit cheaper. Zirkzee, like I said, £35 million release clause. He's rumored to be going to AC Milan, but it sounds like Bologna is either happy for a bidding war, or Arsenal and United are in on him as well as Sesko. But I think Sesko probably, even though United may want him the most, I think we're the least likely to get him because he'd probably go to Arsenal if he had a choice. And then for the DM targets, the three we're most linked to, I would say, are João Neves from Benfica, Hjemlund from Sporting Lisbon, and Fofana from Monaco. Honorable mention, Amadou Onana from Everton as well, although they don't really talk about him that much, but I think he's a great option. Neves is someone, I think we've met with George Mendes, who's his agent, along with a few other people. And there's rumors of a bid for this guy. I think Ineos would really like him. I think he's a good player. He's like, I don't know, he's a little bit smaller, and, not to be heightist, but Mainu's not huge. Neves is kind of small. Pairing those two together in the midfield, you worry about sort of the size. The midfield, the Premier League is very physical, but if you watch Neves, yeah, he's a little bit shorter, but he's kind of got that like boxy, Shaqiri frame. Shaqiri the footballer, not Shakira the hips don't lie dancer. Shaqiri played at Bayern, I think, not too long ago. He also played at Stoke City with Arnautovic and those guys. He was always this kind of like shorter, stocky guy, and Neves kind of has that same build. He's very quick. He's very strong. He's amazing on the ball. Very good long pass at him. Good at tackling. I think this guy is a very good signing for us. But, Benfica, they know how to, get the most out of players. And if you show up, it's like 100 million or he's not coming. So that's my one worry with him. I would like him, but I don't think United are going to spend that much on a player. Hjulmand apparently has also got a release clause of 80 million. He's someone we've talked about a lot. But I think if he's only going to go for his release clause of 80 million and nothing else, I think that's a non-starter for United. He's a good player. He's a good kind of defensive-minded six. Not great on the ball like Neves is, but he's not terrible. And I think as a guy who can run and break up play, he started for Denmark, not as a six or a defensive midfielder, but as like a 8 center midfielder. So, maybe there's a little bit more to his game than I'm giving him credit for. And then Fofana from Monaco, he's somebody that we looked at last year. He has 1 year left on his deal. So I think 25 million pounds would be enough to get him out of Monaco. It sounds like he's willing to force a move. He's been trying to leave. He's not a pure 6. He's more of like a 6-8 hybrid, but he's really good in the tackle and he's really good on the ball. Can really carry the ball, dribble, forward with the ball. I think he's a good option because of such a cheap price. Onana's another guy. He's probably my favorite player for this position. He's 6'5". He would just increase. He would raise the athletic floor for this team. Very very high immediately. And he's 6'5". He's got really long legs. He reminds me of Wan-Bissaka a little bit, the way he can just kind of dive in there and get those tackles and just win the ball off people from like crazy distances. But he's a Everton, and Everton just needs to raise money, and they might sell either Branthwaite or Onana to make that money back. It sounds like we're more interested in Branthwaite than Onana. And it sounds like if they were able to sell one of them for a decent price, then they wouldn't have to sell the other one for cheap. Because we're more interested, I think, in Branthwaite, I don't have Onana on my list of the top 3, but for me, he's like my ideal signing. And then additionally, it looks like they're signing a left back. Honestly, I don't know that much about these left backs. I know Kirkes from Bournemouth is young. He was there for a year. He's like a guy with a lot of potential, but he's not, great now. He's a guy you could bring in just to kind of deputize Luke Shaw and, compete with Malacia if he's sticking around. And then Ait-Nouri from Wolves. He's another George Mendes client. He's a very quick, good on the ball, plays a lot in as a left wing back, not really as a left back, but he's a very good attacking fullback. Can cross, can shoot, can invert and play passes. He's a very good player, but I don't know about him defensively. Hasn't had to defend that much when he's at Wolves. And then this guy Gutierrez from Girona. He's a good player. I don't know that much about him. I just know he's very technically gifted. He can play winger. He can play left back. He can play central midfield. So he can kind of rotate wherever needed, either, as an option for other positions or just within the general rotation, especially if Ten Hag's the manager. Most people play that way anyway. He can be an inverted fullback. He can overlap. He can play all over the pitch. So that's basically the transfer ins this week. Let's move over to the outs. This one should be a little quicker. Pretty quiet. It looks like, none of United's players are really top targets for anyone. Casemiro to Saudi is his most likely destination. He's a top target there, but nothing crazy going on right now. They're not desperate to sign him. Sancho and Greenwood are definitely for sale as well. Sancho was deemed too expensive for Dortmund. This one sounds like a major game of chicken. Dortmund was just, waxing lyrical about how amazing Sancho is, really bigging him up on Twitter and social media, writing love letters about how amazing he is and how he's always been great. Real public love fest. But now they're acting coy. They're saying he's not a priority. United's price for him is too much. So they're going to have to look elsewhere. They're doing this with Ian Maatsen and Chelsea as well. We'll see what happens. But it looks like they're closer to agreeing a deal with Ian Maatsen and Chelsea than they are with United for Sancho. But who knows? United have put out some statements saying they're selling Sancho. That's the only thing they're doing. They're not loaning him out. And other clubs around Europe would be interested with him as well. He has a very high salary. United put a £40 million transfer fee on him, it sounds like. But his huge salary is probably going to be a hindrance for people setting that up. Either they're going to, sanction another loan where they don't have to pay a lot of his wages, or, they're going to have to supplement his salary. Maybe they could do like a stretch provision thing where they, agree to pay a certain amount for the next 20 years. That's what I do. It's a very American thing, but we'll see what happens there. Greenwood is appreciated by Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, and Juventus. All those teams. Barcelona, I don't know what they're going to do. They don't have any money. They've been broke for a couple of years now, trying to figure out ways to raise money, but they definitely do appreciate him. They've been talking about swap deals. I don't think United would take a swap deal because Greenwood is a pure profit player because he's a youth player. Atletico Madrid want him as well. We'll see what they're willing to spend. Juve as well. Greenwood's on reasonable wages, and he's a young player, despite his off-the-field issues. I think in another league he could potentially reach his potential. I think coming back to England for him would be insane, just because of the way the press is, one, for United players, two, for just English players in general. I don't think it would be a good idea on his end. Plus, if you're United or any of these clubs, do you really want a player with that kind of baggage who's done what he's done to be at the club? I'd say no. But, maybe somewhere abroad is not as bad. Juventus are someone who's interested, but at the same time, Italian clubs don't usually spend a lot of money on new players. They don't pay large transfer fees. So we'll see where he turns up. Fenerbahce in Turkey is rumored to want Aaron Wan-Bissaka and McTominay for a combined 25 million euros. That story, I think, is nonsense. Jose Mourinho is the new manager of Fenerbahce. I could see him, wanting to raid United players and Premier League players. That's what they've been doing in Turkey. They've been bringing in some of these larger players or former Premier League players on large salaries, but low transfer fees. And, we sold Fred, I believe, to Galatasaray, if I'm not mistaken, or Besiktas. I can't remember which one. And he crushed it over there. So obviously these Premier League players would do well. I think the story is nonsense just because I would expect 25 million euros for each player individually. And if United sell them combined for that, I will personally fly out there and I don't know, throw snowballs at Jim Ratcliffe or something. I'll pack some snowballs in a cooler and carry them over. I don't know. That's not a good threat. We're almost an hour in, so I'm kind of losing it here. But yeah, I think it's nonsense. They're also rumored to be interested in Greenwood, but I don't think he has any interest in going to Turkey himself. And then lastly, wanted to talk about United internationals. There's the Euros coming up. Also, Copa America is coming up. We have a lot of internationals out there in action. Today, Bayındır was in action, but he didn't get off the bench. Turkey played Poland. Tomorrow, Dalot and Bruno are in action. Portugal play Ireland in a friendly. And then from that point on, all the European games are going to be Euro group stage matches. Luke Shaw and Kobbie Mainoo, if Luke Shaw does stay healthy and he makes the final cut. I think he made the final cut, but we'll see what happens. England versus Serbia, that's on the 16th. I believe that's next Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. The 16th. Let me see. Yep, that's next Sunday. That's when they play. Denmark plays Slovenia. And Denmark, I think that one is also Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. And then Scotland plays Germany. They play on Friday, the 14th. And then, so Rasmus Højlund and Christian Eriksen, they're going to be playing for Denmark versus Slovenia. Slovenia is the team that Benjamin Šeško plays for, so that'll be a good opportunity to watch him play as well. McTominay plays for Scotland, who played Germany on Friday the 14th. Germany, I think, are the host nation. McTominay, we'll see if he can duplicate his international form from last year. He was on fire, scoring goals left and right. And then Lisandro Martinez and Garnacho, they were in action yesterday for a friendly against, I think it was Ecuador. Garnacho didn't get off the bench, but Lisandro Martinez started, and he played really well. And, it sounds like the fans were really happy with him. They have a friendly on Friday against Guatemala, and then the following Thursday, the 20th, that's the first Copa America group stage match for Argentina. So a lot of chances to watch United players. Not really into international football that much, but if you want to find a reason to watch or to root for these teams, at least you can see how United players are doing and potentially see, how some of their players we're recruiting is doing as well. João Neves, he's playing for Portugal. Branthwaite is not playing for England. Denmark, Hjulland, what's his name? Hjulland, I don't know his name. He's going to be playing against Slovenia as well. And then we can kind of look for other players. I don't think Xerxes was called up by Netherlands, but you might be able to find some of these other players out there as well. So yeah, that's it for me. That's the United in the States news show for this week. I don't think future episodes are going to be quite as long. Latest on Ten Hag's future. Honestly, nobody knows, right? Like, we know that I talked about it a little bit earlier in the show. We know that the Ineos and Rashford, or is that Rashford, and Ratcliffe and all those guys, they've been meeting with managers this week. We know that just replying to the one side comment here, I'm not sure if he's still on the stream, but we know that Ten Hag is just up in the air. Apparently he's back at Carrington. He's working on transfers. The way he spoke, about this transfer window, he sounded like Ineos was working with him on targets, and they were working with him to come up with the go forward strategy, and that's probably what he's doing now. It sounds like most of the targets were Ten Hag approved anyway. Like, if you look at the different targets that we've had, I know Todibo and Branthwaite, I think, at least, but definitely Todibo, Ten Hag approved. Elise, Ten Hag approved. Xerxes and Sesko, Ten Hag approved. Cunha as well. I think he would like João Neves. I don't know about the DMs he would want. Maybe he would want, Amrabat to stay. He didn't really play him until the last few games of the season, but he played very well. But you could do something where you sign Amrabat and then sign Fofana as well. But as far as the Ten Hag future, nobody knows at this point. All we know is that he is still in the job, and maybe Ineos pop out and they say, "Ha, fooled you." We were signing Ten Hag this whole time to a new contract, and he's going to stay. And we're not going to do anything else with the manager front, but we know for sure they've spoken to other managers, and we know for sure they've, gone out there and gamed out at least what it would mean to not have Ten Hag in the future. And they've kind of briefed people on this, or at least it's been briefed, to reliable sources that he's kind of twisting in the wind. So as far as his future, it's the same as it's been probably 2 weeks ago. We don't know. Hopefully we'll know this week. But at the end of the day, it's anybody's guess at this point. Romano has just made a few, Fabrizio Romano, he's just made a few, updates on that. And it's just been, if the Ineos decide to sack Ten Hag, they say it's still 50-50. If it happens, David Ornstein's been real quiet about Ten Hag's future. So until, those guys start saying things, or if the club puts out a statement, your guess is good as mine. But anyway, like I said, thanks for coming, watching the stream, everyone who lasted this long. I really appreciate it. It's been a tough time for me. It's kind of like, late over here on the East Coast. It's 9 p.m., way past my bedtime. But I think this is something where we're going to do a much shorter show moving forward. Just wanted to add a little bit more of the background coming in, and hopefully we get a little bit more clarity on the manager situation. which I think will lead to more clarity on the signings and the future of the club in general. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. If you didn't get a chance to drop a comment here, we got 2 comments, one from one side, one from Christina Timkiv. Sounds familiar. But yeah, if just once you watch the video on the replay, if you have any suggestions, let me know. Like, do you think Ten Hag is staying? Do you think he's getting sacked? Don't forget, like, subscribe, drop your comments. Let me know what you think about, our summer business so far and what we're going to do moving forward.